What is up, Internet? We have an amazing, very special book for you today. It's called The Most Dangerous Superstition by my man, Larkin Rose. Larkin, thank you for writing this book. You are a genius. I mean, yeah. You are an absolute genius. Thank you for writing this book, Larkin. So I'm going to start off with a note about the copyright. A copyright is usually an implied threat. Don't copy this or else. I hope that anyone who likes this book will buy additional copies from me, but if someone does copy it without my permission, that alone will not make me feel justified in using force against that person on my own or via government. If someone started selling bootlegged copies, that's another story, but I copyrighted this book primarily so that no one else could copyright it and therefore use the violence of the state to prevent me from disturbing it. Larkin Rose. That is an awesome note. I love that. That made me laugh. So, one of the countless things I love about this book is that Larkin Rose, he doesn't dilly-dally around, he gets straight to the truth, which he comes out swinging and hits us with the punchline. And the punchline of this book is, in quotes, "The belief in authority, which includes all belief in government, is irrational and self-contradictory. It is contrary to civilization and morality and constitutes the most dangerous, destructive superstition that has ever existed. Rather than being a force for order and justice, the belief in authority is always the arch enemy of humanity." And so some green language, the green language of the word belief is to be lie, or to be a part of a lie, or to, to believe in a lie. Or if you look at it in terms of, like being stagnant, like lying down, to be lie. And then the word government breaks down in Latin, the word government breaks down to governare mens mentes, which means governare, which obviously it's the word govern, which is to control, and then mens mentes, which is the mind. So if you look at the word governmental, govern, split the word in half. Governmental, it means to govern the mind. So right after the punchline, Larkin gets into the fact that most of us are raised with the idea that obedience to authority is a virtue. The idea that obeying arbitrary laws such as paying taxes and staying home when the government tells us is what keeps the peace. But, you can, looking throughout history, read a history book, you can see the direct violence being caused because of this mantra of play by the rules and you'll be okay. A true moral person takes responsibility of knowing the difference between right and wrong, or violent and non-violent. Larkin uses Hitler as an example. Hitler's gay-hating racism as one man. It's just, that by itself is just one man's opinion that took over 1 million lives in the 1940s. It was all the people that viewed Hitler as authority that made it all possible. So there's a chapter called Identifying the Enemy, and we have to establish what the government is. And government is an entity that tells us what to do. Preachers and advertisers also tell us what to do, but with government there is a sense of moral legitimacy, which is where authority comes in. And authority is basically the right to rule, and he breaks this down. He breaks it down really easy for us, like literally a child could read this book and understand most of it for the most part. It gives the right to rule. So what distinguishes a street gang from government is how they are perceived by the people they control. The difference between a thug and government is the loot a thug collects is not referred to as taxes, and their threats are not seen as laws. And another thing that I absolutely love about this book is anytime he uses words like law or government or authority or moral legitimacy, they're always in quotes. When you read this whole book, all these words are out in quotes because it's just that's what the most dangerous superstition is the belief in authority. So, and then Larkin continues to say that government is an irrational superstition that has a lot of similarities to a cult. And I mean, if you just take a few seconds to think about it, yeah, the similarities between a cult and government is absolutely astounding.
A cult?
No, a cult, not a cult.
Oh, good knowledge.
So there is no such thing as good authority. Government and authority, just like money, does not exist. The soldiers are real. The police, politicians, buildings, they exist, city halls, those are all real. But the soldiers are real, the police, politicians, buildings, they exist. Without authority, they are just a gang of thugs at the end of the day. And like I said, Larkin explains this very, very clearly and very easy to understand. On page 12, the word government is broken down to a command. Because if you do not follow the law, you are threatened with violence, whether it's a law against murder or a law against building a deck in your backyard without a building permit. You are threatened with confiscation of property through fines or kidnapping, or you're threatened with the idea of getting thrown in jail. The average sovereign human being can't commit these acts of violence. The average sovereign human being can't commit these acts of violence, but once backed up by authority, it becomes regulation and it becomes law enforcement. Law enforcement. Keep getting feedback from this mic. Anyways, so before part 2 begins, with the status rhetoric of "we require government in order to ensure our survival," Larkin says that no one would argue that Christmas wouldn't exist without Santa. Another example is if someone jumps out of a plane without a parachute, the need of a parachute doesn't make one, materials come out of nowhere. You're not going to pull a parachute out of your asshole because you jumped out of a plane without one. Just because you need one. It's not, and that example right there proves that the argument is just it's just a logical fallacy, is really all it is. So, and then part 2 of the book, we're starting to get into part 2 of the book. He breaks down the fact that government is a religion. Here's a direct quote. Like other religions, the gospel of government describes a supernatural entity above mere mortals which issues commandments to the peasantry, for whom unquestioning obedience is a moral imperative. And that was off page 28. And then from there we get into something that happened, I forget when it happened, maybe the 70s and the 80s. We get into something called the Milgram experiments. And I'll read a direct quote straight out of the book. So in brief, so subjects were asked to volunteer for what they were told was an experimental testing human memory. Under the supervision of a scientist, the authority figure, one person was strapped into a chair and wired with electrodes, and the other, the actual subject of the study, sat in front of a shock-generating machine. The person in front of the zapper machine was told that the goal of the test, whether shocking the other person when he gave the wrong answer to a memorization question, would affect his ability to remember things. The true goal, however, was to test to what degree the person in front of the zapper machine would inflict pain on an innocent stranger simply because the perceived authority told him to. The zapper machine had a series of switches going up to 450 volts, and the zapper was supposed to increase the voltage and administer another shock each time the zappee got an answer wrong. The zappee in the test were actually an actor who was not being shocked at all, but at given voltage levels would give out shouts of pain, protest about heart troubles, demanding to stop the experiment, screams for mercy, and eventually silence, feigning unconsciousness or death. And the zapper machine was clearly marked with dangerous labels at the upper end of the series of switches. The result of the experiment shocked even Dr. Milgram. In short, a significant majority of the subjects, nearly 2 out of 3, continued the experiment right to the end, inflicting what they thought were excruciatingly painful, if not lethal, shocks to a complete stranger, despite the screams of agony, the cries of mercy, even the unconscious or the death-pretending victim. Dr. Milgram I'm not going to read that part. But yeah, so that experiment was a testament to the religion of authority, to the religion of government, and what basically good people will do just because somebody told them to give, because they don't have to take responsibility. And then that gets into the chapter. We get into the chapter of teaching blind obedience, which in public education, the master/slave mentality is taught masterfully well in the teacher-student relationship. You are rewarded when you are present when you are present where authority tells you to be. You are rewarded when you do what you are told. You are praised when you speak how you are taught to speak, manners, asking permission. Yeah, I wrote in the notes asking permission to expel bodily fluids from your spacesuit. Shout out to the illusion. You are rewarded on tests for memorization and repeating what you were taught, and punished for asking, the wrong types of questions. So like if let's say you have a math equation where Steve has 14 apples and Bob has 7 apples. But you'll get in trouble for asking why are they why you get in trouble for asking questions like why are they out buying apples? Why don't they buy something else? You get in trouble for asking like these psychology questions like that in math, and the teacher will probably laugh at you. You are taught what clothes to wear, what hairstyles to have, what face to make, how to sit in a chair, what to have on your desk, and what direction to face, and what to say and how to say it. You are rewarded when telling authority when another student disobeys or breaks the rules. When you snitch on your on your classmates. All the while, teachers are allowed to confiscate personal property, demand arbitrary rules, establish power, and not long ago, teachers were given permission to use corporal punishment to spank your children. Going on from there, the next chapter mentions another experiment at Stanford University in 1971 where a mock prison was set up with dozens of students appointed as mock prisoners and others as mock prison guards. The experiment had to be terminated early after only 16 days because those who had been given authority had becoming shockingly callous, abusive, and sadistic towards their prisoners. And there's another direct quote from page 62. From there we get into the psychology of the military. No matter which side is discussed, every standing army teaches the soldiers that the enemy is a sort of a lower life form. In other words, the victim is demonized, usually given a repugnant nickname like I don't want to repeat any of the nicknames, but I'm sure you could think of some that people use, that soldiers use. Police officers are also guilty of this dehumanization. All of the ideas solidify obedience to authority, solidify the idea that obedience to authority is a virtue and disobedience is a sin. Like police officers call, every day they call them. I've heard the nickname word civvies used. Civilians. Civilians versus actual officers. They look down on us all the time. There are countless of examples of how training a human being in this way can create a monster leading to violence, death, and misery. Some examples include the massacre at My Lai. I think I pronounced that right. The massacre at My Lai during the Vietnam War, displayed in images that came out of Abu Ghraib. I worked on pronouncing that. Abu Ghraib. I'm totally butchering that. Prison in Iraq. The brutality of Ruby Ridge in 1992, and the case of Brian Dennehy, the case of Breonna Taylor, the case of George Floyd. Countless amounts of examples of how this belief in authority creates misery and violence and death. It doesn't create what it's supposedly meant to create, what they say it is going to create. The same ideology is shared with tax collectors and other bureaucrats, like the food stamps people, anybody who works at a Social Security office. These kinds of jobs. And then I'm gonna quote another paragraph from the chapter of what the badge means, what the police officer badge means. So those who claim to act under authority of government usually go out of their way to make it clear that they are doing so. When a soldier dons his military attire marching in formation, or gets into the military vehicle, when a cop puts on his uniform and gets into the car marked police, when a plainclothes government agent, whether the FBI, IRS, U.S. Marshals, or other agency, shows his badge or announce his official title, he is making a very specific statement which can be summed up as follows. I am not acting as a thinking, responsible, independent human being and should not be treated as such. I am not personally responsible for my actions because I am not acting from my own free will or my own judgment of right and wrong. I am instead acting as the tool of something superhuman, something with the right to rule and control you. As such, I can do things that you can't. I have the rights that you don't. You must do as I say, submit to my commands, treat me as your superior, because I am not a mere human being. I have risen above that. Through my unquestioning obedience and loyalty to my masters, this quote is almost done. I become a piece of the superhuman entity called government and act on its authority. As a result, the rules of human morality do not apply to me, and my actions should not be judged by the usual standards of human behavior. And that right there says it all. We could shut the camera off right there. That says the entire problem of our country. That sums up the entire idea of this quote, which is the most greatest superstition. But we're gonna keep going on. So from there, I gotta find the next part. So from there, Larkin Rose gets into he teaches us about the most decorated U.S. Marine in history, who wrote a book called War is a Racket. And Jasmine, this is gonna have to be added to our over $1,000 list of Amazon books that we want to get. Okay. So yeah, if you want to buy any of these books, send us money, paypal.com/nettrour, NETTROUR. NETTROUR. Anyways, he wrote a book called War is a Racket that criticized the military-industrial complex, saying that war is, quote-unquote, conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many, even going as far to describe his own military service as the actions of a high-class muscle man, a racketeer, and a gangster. The next chapter discusses why taxation is theft, the fact that people take pride in being robbed and sometimes even look down on those who refuse as guilty tax cheats. That should be thrown in jail. Thrown in a cage was seen as unpatriotic. Guilty tax cheats. And I would like to read this entire book, but the entirety of this book is already on YouTube, so I'm not going to read it. This is just I'm not going to say quick review, because that's probably not the word I should use. But anyways, so this is another direct quote straight from the book, because this book is absolutely amazing. I know I've quoted it a lot. So, one who begs for lower taxes is implicitly agreeing that it is up to the politicians how much a man may keep of what he has earned. One who begs the politicians not to disarm him via gun control is, by doing so, conceding that it is up to the master whether to let him be armed or not. In fact, those who lobby for politicians to respect any of the people's unalienable rights do not believe in unalienable rights at all. Rights which require government approval are not unalienable and are not even rights. They are privileges granted or withheld at the whim of the master. And those who hold positions of power know that they have nothing to fear from people who do nothing but pathetically beg for freedom and justice. However loudly the dissenters talk about demanding their rights, the message they actually send is this: we agree, master, that it is up to you what we may and may not do. Some powerful fucking... I'm trying not to cuss. YouTube's gonna not pay me money like they already do anyway. So, some powerful words right there. So from there we go to... From there, then we are... Larkin gets into the road... Larkin gets into the rose. From there, we are taught why the draft was immoral and the psychological damage of the soldiers what the soldiers experienced when they came back home. And from there, we go full circle back to the Holocaust and dismiss the Warsaw ghettos and the victims of World War II. Larkin also points out that the U.S. Supreme Court case of Fleming v. Nestor 363 U.S. 603 made it clear that no one has any contractual contractual rights to any Social Security benefits at all, regardless of how much they have paid into it. And so I would highly recommend looking up that court case if you don't believe me or believe Larkin. Highly recommend looking into that court case. Congress can cut off any or all benefits anytime it wants. Page 114. It is then explained that as soon as you have to ask for permission to drive, to build a deck, to ask for a tax break, to take your gun out of your own house, to take the gun that you own out of your house to protect yourself and your family, you gotta ask permission. You are giving power to the slave master that owns you, farther solidifying the master-slave relationship. Please, Mr. Government, can I smoke this plant? Please, Mr. Government, can you give me some food stamps? Can you rob my neighbor so I can go get steaks and Red Bull, because that's what people do with food stamps. I've seen it done. I've seen more people with food stamps buy energy drinks than they would their own actual food with intrinsic value. Again, asking for protection from government or any entity or any being puts you under them, farther enforcing the master-slave relationship. And then I'm going to do another quote. Oh, I already said that quote. Oh, okay. Well, we'll finish off with one last quote. This is kind of a long one, I'm sorry. Like I said, if I had the time, I would read this entire book out loud to you people of YouTube and the internet. But that's not necessary. Larkin Rose already put this video up. There's also one other book review on this book, which is absolutely ashamed. There should be hundreds of book reviews on this book, and it just goes to show how ignorant people are, how much they don't read. That's what we're trying to do here at Beagle Eye. We're trying to normalize books. Books are good. It's a movie. You can direct yourself. You can make the characters look how you want to. Books are awesome. Read some books. And again, like all the other book reviews, you can get this book off Amazon for $6 or $7. Get it in the used section. Yeah, I got this book used. Sorry, Larkin. I really like this. I like to support people, but I'm poor. Or if you can afford it, buy the book directly from Larkin. Ask him to sign it. Ask him to put a little note in it. I'm sure he will have no obligation to do that, because we all need to survive. So just to close out, to summarize this entire book that you can get off Amazon for $6 probably. If you love death and destruction, oppression and suffering, injustice and violence, repression and torture, helplessness and despair, perpetual conflict and bloodshed, then teach your children to respect authority and teach them that obedience is a virtue. If, on the other hand, you value peaceful coexistence, compassion and cooperation, freedom and justice, then teach your children the principle of self-ownership. Teach them to respect the rights of every human being, and teach them to recognize and reject the belief in authority for what it is. The most irrational, self-contradictory, anti-human, evil, destructive, and dangerous superstition that the world has ever known. And that is a fact. Wow, microphone. So go ahead and buy this book. Buy this book off the internet. It's only $6. Beagle Eyes, signing off. Hey, keep on the lookout for future music videos. Shout out to Larkin Rose. Shout out to Cubbyhole Podcast, Wake the Dead Podcast, Marshall West, One Great Work Network, Mark Pastio, all legends. And we love you here at Beagle Eye.